Picture Europe's busiest highways, now brought to a standstill, not by accidents, but by a slow-moving wall of tractors. From Paris to Berlin, Brussels to Madrid, farmers united in a massive, coordinated protest, their engines roaring and horns blaring. This wasn't a minor demonstration. It was a continent-wide blockade, a show of force that no politician could ignore. Farmers from France, Germany, the Netherlands, and beyond rolled out their mud-caked machines, blocking roads and city centers. In Paris, they threatened to encircle the city. In Brussels, they dumped manure at the EU's doorstep. This was anger made visible, decades of frustration boiling over. The protests weren't about a single issue, but a pile-up. Low prices, high costs, endless paperwork, and rules that seemed out of touch with reality. The tractors were more than vehicles. They were a desperate message. We can't survive like this. This was no polite request. It was a last stand for their farms, families, and way of life. The world was forced to pay attention. The great European blockade was a slow-motion crash, each problem adding to the wreck. Farmers weren't protesting for fun. They were fighting for survival, and they wanted everyone to know it. You might think farmers are cushioned by government subsidies. In Europe, the Common Agricultural Policy, or CAP, dishes out billions. But getting that money is a bureaucratic nightmare. Endless forms, shifting rules, and the constant threat of losing payments over minor mistakes. Many farmers spend more time on paperwork than in the fields. And the subsidies? They haven't kept up with rising costs. For small farms, it's not a bonus, it's life support. Selling crops or milk often doesn't cover production costs. Subsidies just fill the gap. So when governments cut things like diesel subsidies, it's not a small inconvenience. It's an existential threat. Imagine telling a taxi driver you'll triple his fuel price, but he can't raise his fares. Farmers see the safety net slipping away, even as demands and regulations pile up. The result? Desperation, and tractors on the motorways. The pact between farmers and the EU is breaking down. They're being asked to do more for less with less support. That's why the protests erupted. Farming is expensive and getting pricier by the day. Fuel, fertilizer, seeds, machinery, costs have soared, while the price farmers get for their produce barely budges. When energy prices spike, so do fuel and fertilizer bills, but farmers can't just raise their prices. Supermarkets and processors set the market, leaving farmers to absorb the pain. Every fill-up, every bag of fertilizer chips away at their already thin margins. Use less fertilizer, yields drop, pay more, profits vanish. It's a no-win situation. Meanwhile, food prices rise in stores, but farmers see none of that extra money. The middlemen take the profit, while farmers shoulder the risk. Weather, disease, and rising costs. It's a system that feels rigged. Farmers are the backbone of the food chain, yet get the smallest slice. The frustration is real and growing. The cost squeeze is relentless, and it's pushing farmers to the brink. Farmers know the land. They depend on healthy soil and clean water. But sweeping EU green policies like the Green Deal often feel disconnected from farm realities. Ambitious targets, less pesticide, less fertilizer, more land set aside, mean more work, lower yields, and higher costs. The financial support to adapt is often tangled in red tape or simply inadequate. Imagine being told to buy a new electric car, but only getting a voucher for tires. Farmers feel burdened with the cost of Europe's climate ambitions, but without the tools or funding to meet them. They're painted as environmental villains, even as they try to feed the continent. The rules feel arbitrary, the support insufficient. The risk? Hitting climate targets but losing Europe's own farmers, and relying on imports from places with lower standards. European farmers face strict rules on safety, environment, animal welfare, making their products costlier. But global trade means they compete with imports produced under looser standards and lower costs. The Ukraine crisis saw a flood of cheap grain into Europe, undercutting local farmers. The looming Mercosur deal could bring in even more cheap beef and grain from South America. Farmers call this unfair, forced to meet high standards, while imports don't. They demand a level playing field. If Europe bans certain pesticides or sets animal welfare rules, imports should meet them too. Otherwise, it's not competition. It's outsourcing environmental harm and undercutting local producers. Farmers feel they're fighting with one hand tied behind their backs. The trade rules are stacked against them. This is a core reason for their anger, and why they're demanding change. Backed into a corner, farmers made themselves impossible to ignore. They used tractors to block highways, ports, and distribution centers, paralyzing supply chains in cities. Supermarkets ran short on fresh food, commuters faced gridlock, and businesses lost millions. The message was clear: without farmers, the country stops. This was no random chaos. Farmer unions coordinated blockades across borders, targeting key economic arteries. They hit supermarket distribution centers, pressuring the very companies squeezing them on prices. In Brussels, protests turned tense, clashes with police, burning hay bales, and water cannons. The blockades were risky. Farmers knew they could alienate the public or face a crackdown. But after years of being ignored, this was their last desperate move. The Great Blockade was a gamble, but it forced governments to the table. The tractors made their point, and the world took notice. Public reaction was split. Many, especially in rural areas, cheered the farmers, seeing them as hard-working people fighting for survival. Polls showed strong support in places like France. People brought food and coffee to the blockades, honked in solidarity, and saw the protests as a stand against corporate and political indifference. But for city dwellers stuck in traffic or small businesses losing money, sympathy faded fast. The longer the blockades lasted, the more frustration grew. Some saw farmers as heroes, others as selfish disruptors. Farmers walked a tightrope, needing disruption to force change, but risking public support. The narrative could shift quickly from struggling farmers to arrogant bullies. The cheers and jeers reflected a society divided between those who understand farming struggles and those who just want to get to work. The protests exposed a deep disconnect and forced everyone to think about where their food comes from. With cities blocked and public anger rising, governments scrambled to respond. France and Germany scrapped plans to cut diesel subsidies. Emergency aid was announced. The EU promised to simplify farm rules and paused controversial trade deals. These were quick fixes meant to get tractors off the roads, not solve the deeper crisis. Farmers weren't convinced. They'd heard promises before. Scrapping a tax hike or easing paperwork didn't fix low incomes or unfair competition. The concessions were seen as a temporary truce, not real change. Some blockades lifted, but distrust lingered. The core problems, costs, competition, and regulation, remained. Farmers' unions warned, without real reform, the tractors would return. Governments bought time, not peace. The crisis was far from over. This isn't just Europe's problem. When European farmers struggle, the effects ripple worldwide. Europe is a major food producer. If its farms falter, food prices rise everywhere. The crisis exposes a global dilemma: how to balance cheap food, environmental goals, and fair farmer incomes. We want all three, but right now we're failing at each. Farmers are asked to go green, but aren't paid the green price. Is it fair to demand the highest standards from our farmers, then let cheaper, lower standard imports compete? The protests are a wake-up call. Food doesn't appear by magic. It's the result of hard work and risk. Ignoring farmers' struggles threatens the whole system that feeds us all.